Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, October the 24th, 2023. Yesterday I talked about the horoscope of Greta Thunberg, and a commenter, Alabama Barbie, pointed out to me that Kyle Rittenhouse was born on the same day as Greta Thunberg. That was January the 3rd, 2003. So, thank you very much, Alabama Barbie. That's the kind of trivia that I usually know, that kind of thing, people born on the same day. I'm quite sort of into those kind of coincidences. But I'm kind of surprised that I missed that. But it's not really trivia because I actually think it's pretty important. So if you don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is, he's obviously born the same day as Greta. He's 20 years old, and in 2020 he was attending, well, he was, I don't know about attending a demonstration, but he was there to, I think, protect businesses. That's how he saw it, from a demonstration in Wisconsin, and wanting to protect businesses, he brought a firearm with him. I don't know whether it was just one. I'm not really into the details of the case. And as a result, he killed two people. And, the argument was that it was in self-defense. They were people involved with this demonstration. They were threatening businesses, and he was standing there. I suppose he would sit in sort of supporting law and order, but he did kill two people, and he was tried for this, and he was found not guilty, and he became he was a cause célèbre on the right. The people sort of pushing back against all this sort of BLM protests, people who supported Second Amendment rights, those kind of people. And so in a way, he and Greta are kind of the opposite of each other. Greta is a sort of icon for progressives, whereas Kyle Rittenhouse is an icon for the right. But they're born on the same day. And what I want to try to do is sort of isolate the similarities, because, they have the same chart. I don't know the time of birth for Greta Thunberg or for Kyle Rittenhouse. So effectively, we're dealing with the same chart. We know there are going to be some differences because we don't know their exact time, but with no time, we are looking at the same chart. And so we have to ask this question when we look at this chart, which describes both of them, who have similarities but certainly have big differences. How do we explain this? I mean, what are their similarities? Well, the similarities are, I suppose they're both activists, for very different causes. Greta is an activist for the environment. Rittenhouse is a sort of activist for, I suppose, Second Amendment rights. Also, in the run-up to this event, he was really into sort of law and order and supporting the police, that kind of thing. Very opposite to Greta. But still, they are both activists. They both became icons for different political groupings. They both became famous when they were very young. So yeah, they have connections. I think they both had sort of fairly interrupted schooling for different reasons, as far as I can see. Um, so those are the similarities, both very much associated with demonstrations. Um, so yeah, what is it about those two that make them similar? Of course, there are differences. Obviously, one's male, the other's female. One is progressive, one is on the right. So yes, there are differences. But I do want to look at that chart, their charts, because they have, they have the same chart without times of birth. Yes, they're born in different places. Kyle Rittenhouse was born in Antioch, Illinois. Greta was born in Stockholm, in Sweden. But without a time of birth, that difference starts to blur. So that's what I want to look at, and I want to try to be creative and just come up with some ideas about how one can look at the situation. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Tuesday, October the 24th, 2023. So let's look at today's planet. So this is a position of the planets at noon, October the 24th, 2023, today, in New York. There's a lot that's really good going on today. We've got the moon in Pisces, and the moon is making a trine aspect to Mercury and Mars. We also have the sun that's just gone into Scorpio making a trine to Saturn. So we've got these Pisces planets, moon and Saturn, are in trine to the Sun and Mercury. And of course, they're all in water signs, Pisces and Scorpio. So the emphasis is on feelings. You will notice that today today is completely negative. Now, by completely negative, what I mean by that is that the fire signs and the air signs are positive. The water signs and the earth signs are negative. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's more about, the creative and the receptive. And it's all earth and water. It's all about response. It's not really a day for taking big active initiatives. It's about standing back and responding to what is going on, standing back and trying to understand what's going on. With all of that water, Sun, Mercury, Mars, Moon, Saturn in water signs, we need to listen to our feelings. We need to understand the world around us by listening to those feelings. Then we can perhaps work out how to respond. But I don't think that's going to be today for most of us. So that's the way to handle today's energies, in my opinion. Now, to be more specific about what's going on, with all that water, you think of emotionality. You might be thinking about relationships and sort of letting go and becoming part of some sort of union or whatever. But Saturn is involved. Saturn is a bit of a disciplinarian, and Saturn is about structure. So because Saturn is involved, Sun in Scorpio, trine Saturn. Sun in Scorpio, yeah, sure, is a very emotional planet, and Sun in Scorpio, a lot of emotionality there. But when it trines Saturn exerts a bit of control, prevents things getting out of hand. Likewise, Moon in Pisces, very sort of flexible and fluid, but conjunct Saturn, bit of structure there. And so I think Saturn is actually quite useful because it just prevents us from getting completely washed away in our own feelings. So overall, I think it's a good day, provided we handle things correctly. Not a day for taking big initiatives. Better to just soak it all up, respond, take notes, and try to work out what people are going to do next. And that means just watching them, feeling them. Then in your own time, you can respond accordingly. And then in the end, you can take your initiatives based on the knowledge that you're picking up today. So let me now look at my forecasts for the 12 signs. So here we go. These are my forecasts for today, which is Tuesday, October the 24th, 2023. Aries, the source of your power isn't obvious. At least today it isn't. It comes from the depths of your unconscious and relates to a fundamental understanding of the way the world works. And when the time is right, you'll be ready to take the initiative. The facts have to be right, but they have to be confirmed also by your feelings. Taurus, today you're reliable. The kind of person who can be trusted in a crisis. And people recognize this and give you the trust you deserve. This means that it's a great time for forming new relationships, whatever their purpose. And for your part, you can delegate some of your responsibilities, and this will free up some of your time. Gemini, whether it's a good or a bad day rather depends on you. There will certainly be a lot to complain about. For example, having to do things which are boring, or which are the consequences of someone else's laziness or carelessness. But if you do your best with a good heart, you'll get your rewards, and in the end, it will be one of your better days. Cancer, you can take every event as it comes without thinking too much about it, but only up to a point. At some stage, you have to work out what it all means. Otherwise, you could drive yourself crazy. And today, the meanings will become clearer if you just open your eyes. There's a purpose, even when your freedom of action is being restricted. Leo, something feels stuck. Perhaps you're not getting the response you were expecting, or someone's afraid. But what makes things appear blocked may just be your impatience. If you accept that everything takes time, then you'll be a lot more relaxed, and you'll realize that in actual fact, you've got a lot of freedom. Virgo, you haven't got everything right, and you don't have all the answers. Under these circumstances, you can greatly benefit from interaction with other people, and the wiser and more experienced they are, the better. You might feel that it's humiliating, but actually, by getting help and advice, you're showing your strength. Libra, certain things are a mess, and they need to be straightened out. You know what the problem is, but finding the time to deal with the matter is difficult. But once you engage with the problem, things will be easier than expected, and in terms of money, you can get to grips with some important fundamental issues. Scorpio, things are coming together nicely. The Sun in Scorpio is making a favourable aspect to Saturn in Pisces, so you're able to combine discipline and creativity. Also, you'll have no difficulty getting your message across. You won't have to shout. Just quietly make your point, and everyone will understand. Sagittarius, enough has been said, and you can now watch things play out at a distance. While there might be temptations to reconnect with the outside world, right now you can hold your ground. But it's important that you don't get stuck in one place. A Moon-Saturn conjunction could hold you back and prevent you from doing the things that you like doing best. Capricorn, you're able to bring everything together and coordinate the world around you. It's all about having a plan and being able to explain it. And in terms of relationships, you're able to bridge gaps which in the past had been too wide and too complicated to deal with. The right kind of passion needs to be celebrated rather than avoided. Aquarius, the Sun makes a trine aspect to Saturn. In the Aquarian chart, this configuration can have special relevance to relationships. Whatever the differences between you and the other person, there are many ways to connect, and differences can be balanced and complemented. Working relationships can be very productive. Pisces, you're able to piece things together, taking very chaotic inputs and understanding what matters and what is simply irrelevant. So you'll have a clear picture of the people around you, as well as their motivations and weaknesses. But once you've got the structure, you'll have to decide how best to use your insights in the real world. Okay, I'm now going to turn to the I Ching. And as always, I asked a question, which is, what is Tuesday going to be like for people watching this video? And I threw 3 coins 6 times in 6 times, and I got the following hexagram. Hexagram 17, following. This hexagram raises a question about who's following who. It kind of depends on the situation. There may be people following us, and I mean, but when I say following, I don't mean following in a sort of nasty sense, you know, people sort of hiding behind corners, shadowing us. I'm talking about following in a positive sense. So there may well be people following us who want to follow us. So even if we want to sort of retreat from a fray and sort of move away, there are people who are going to say, hold on, we need to be in touch with that person. So we might find that people do want to stick to us. On the other hand, it may be that we want to do the following. There may be people we want to follow. And in certain situations, this could be about hunting something down. Greg Winkup, in his translation, he doesn't actually call this hexagram the following. He calls it the hunt. And that's like hunting things down. So the idea there is if there's something we really want, we need to go. We need to sort of hunt it down. So it's a search. So we're looking for something and we're trying to find it. So that may be one aspect of what's going on here. Now there are moving lines. The second line from the bottom moves. It's a broken line. It moves to an unbroken line, and this talks about our friendships, the people we the people we interact with, and it seems that we have to make a decision. There's one person who we can follow, one person we can be close to, or there's another person we can be close to, and we can't have it both ways. And one of these people it's the right decision. It's probably someone who is good for us, who is sort of stretching us, is able to help us make the most of our abilities. There's another person who, I don't like to use the word inferior, but that's a suggestion there. Someone who we really shouldn't be dealing with. It may be easier. It may be less taxing to follow this person, to have a friendship with this person, but that's not the right decision. So if you've got a decision about who your friends are, you've got to make the mature choice. Don't just choose someone because it's easy because you've got on with them in the past. This person may pull you back. I mean, I think you know what I mean. If you're in that situation, you'll know what the right choice is, even if it is the difficult choice. Then the top line moves. The top line is about actually finding a position. We can impress someone. So that might suggest that we'll do the following. Maybe, for example, at work, we may be able to do a really good piece of work and impress someone and put ourselves in the right position. And so that is really good. So I think from a career perspective, particularly if you're an employee, you're trying to impress your boss, or you're trying to impress someone who you're doing contract work for, or whatever. Now is a good time to show what you can do, because then you might be given a position, and that might suggest permanence. So, for example, if you're feeling a bit insecure in your job, now might be a time where you can do something really impressive and be given some security, perhaps that you weren't expecting. So I think this is overall this is quite a good hexagram, and it does move, and it moves to hexagram 10, treading. Now treading is about a tiger, and we're trying to deal with a tiger, some quite serious force, and we have to deal with the issue of the tiger's tail. And what happens if we tread on the tiger's tail? Because you'd think if you tread on the tiger's tail, you'd get bitten, and that would be bad. Yes, we tread on the tiger's tail. We're dealing with powerful people, but it seems we're forgiven. And so this may be telling us something about that hexagram following. If we were trying to get on with important people, we might be slightly afraid of these people. But with treading, it seems that we're forgiven, even if we make a few social faux pas, if we make mistakes, we will be forgiven. And this is a suggestion that we have to be a bit cautious, we have to be a bit respectful, but in the end we can get through this. So I think that if you're trying to get on someone's side, get into someone's good books, if you're trying to get support from someone, overall, I think you can get it. So a bit of caution is required today, but overall the I Ching is suggesting that today should be fine. Okay, so now let's look at Greta Thunberg and Kyle Rittenhouse's charts. Okay, so here we are. Okay, let's start with Kyle Rittenhouse. Yes, here we go. This is Kyle Rittenhouse's chart. He was born on January the 3rd, 2003. I don't know his time of birth, so I've gone for noon, and it was in Antioch, Illinois. Now, because I don't know his time of birth, and because I don't know Greta Thunberg's time of birth, it's essentially the same chart, as far as I know, without a time of birth. So, why do we need to just look at a chart and have Kyle Rittenhouse's name on it? Why don't we just create a chart for both of them? So what I did was I created a composite chart where I took the midpoint of the noon in Stockholm, noon in Antioch, Illinois. I took a midpoint of their longitude and latitude, which I know the word Stockholm, Antioch, Illinois, puts you somewhere in the middle of the North Atlantic. And so I set up this chart, and this is a chart that I'm going to be working off. So this chart applies to both Greta Thunberg and Karl Rittenhouse. They have the same chart. Now, they don't have the same personalities. Now, they have certain features in common, as I've already discussed. They're both activists. They both have attended demonstrations. They have both, I suppose they've both been arrested, haven't they? I mean, Greta Thunberg has been arrested on numerous occasions. As far as I know, I don't know, Karl Rittenhouse was, I suppose, arrested the first time for when those two people were killed at the demonstration in, or whatever, the protest in Kenosha. They both became famous when they were very young. So they certainly have some common features, but they do have some things in that are different. Okay, one's a progressive, the one is right wing and believes in law and order and so forth. Well, I'm sure Greta believes in law and order in her own way, but there are some differences. I mean, a more fundamental difference is that one is male and the other is female. Now, in astrology, there are male and female planets. And if you're male, you tend to project your female planets and you keep your male planets, and vice versa if you're female. So in this chart, we have Mars in Scorpio. And I would guess that Mars in Scorpio is going to describe Karl Rittenhouse more than Greta Thunberg. I understand that both of them are, quite assertive in their own ways. But, Mars is the symbol of Mars is the soldier, someone who is potentially aggressive. I mean aggressive in the sense that soldiers have to be aggressive. I mean, that's the way it is. I don't use aggressive necessarily as in a derogatory sense. So you have this image of him and the gun and defending these businesses, and in the process killing two people. That's Mars. That's Mars in Scorpio. He went to Mars in Scorpio. Mars is very well placed in Scorpio. He went to this protest. He tried to defend these businesses. He shot two people. He defended himself. He came out in one piece. He went to court. He was found not guilty. So you could say that Mars in Scorpio, is working pretty well. Now, Greta would perhaps be more described by Venus in Scorpio. She has more ownership over that Venus in Scorpio, being female. So Venus in Scorpio, all the sort of intensity of Venus in Scorpio, she would have ownership of that, and Mars in Scorpio maybe not quite so much. Now, the other male and female planets in astrology are the Sun and the Moon, but in this case, they were born on a new moon, so they both have the Sun in Capricorn. They both have the Moon in Capricorn. So they're Capricorns whichever way you do it. Capricorns, they are, I suppose, very focused on their agendas. Um, they are perhaps very focused on sort of material stuff, what needs to be done. Of course, in Greta, when material stuff is, of course, for her, it's climate change and all this kind of stuff. Um, so anyway, that's a new moon. But we don't have to really worry about projection because okay, whether the sun or the moon gets projected, they're still left with ownership of a Capricorn planet. Um, both of them have Mercury sesquiquadrate Saturn. Um, I think both of them are trying to communicate. As I understand it, Carl Rittenhouse is trying to carve out some kind of media career for himself. Is he? I don't know. He's trying to. He's certainly not. He certainly hasn't. After he got found not guilty, he wasn't just disappearing, fading away. Okay, thank you very much. I'm gone. No, he's kept his profile up. He's had. I think he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson and all of this kind of stuff, and he's. He's a popular figure on the right, and that's another thing these two have got in common. They are both icons. Greta is an icon of the progressive environmental left, I suppose. Carl Rittenhouse is an icon of the law and order right wing in the US, particularly emphasis on not just protecting businesses, but the Second Amendment and so forth. So they both have that in common, and both are communicating a message, and that might be the Mercury in mutual reception with Saturn. Now, what I regard as being something very important in their charts is this Pluto South Node conjunction. Now, this Pluto South Node conjunction is wide. It's 10 degrees wide. That sounds a lot. So wide that it's maybe not even a proper conjunction. I mean, particularly Pluto South Node, these are generational things. These move slowly. There'll be loads and loads of people born end of 2002, 2003 who'll have some form of conjunction between the Pluto and the South Node. You're describing a whole generation. But there's something about this conjunction. You will notice that Pluto and the South Node are exactly 10 degrees apart. Exactly 10 degrees apart. So, and the midpoint of that Pluto South Node conjunction is 13 degrees 20 minutes Sagittarius. Now, that means that Mercury is exactly semi-square the Pluto South Node midpoint for both of them. They both have this. So that semi-square makes it personal, and that 10 degree, the fact that it's exactly 10 degrees makes it personal. So let me explain this now, how I perceive this. So if you look at Reinhold Ebertin and his combination of stellar influences, which he goes through all the midpoint combinations, he talks about the Pluto node midpoint, or the Pluto node pair, and I believe he says something like the tragic destiny of a large group of people. Tragic destiny of a large group of people. Now, think about part of Greta's message. Part of Greta's message, I'm not saying I agree with the message or disagree with the message, I'm just relaying what her message is as I understand it. Part of Greta's message is that she is representing a young generation who is condemned to misery because of climate change. And, the people who have inflicted on her and her generation are previous generations, my generation, older generations than that. We've just gone completely into sort of industrialization, plane travel, pollution, just for the sake of money, and we've just done it for, I don't know, since the 19th century, and now it's critical. Now it's a point of no return. So, from her perspective, that is the tragic destiny of a large group of people. Young people whose futures have been condemned by the profligate, irresponsible behaviour of previous generations. And this is what she's communicating. This is the tragic destiny of her generation. So that fits. Now, what about Kyle Rittenhouse? Now, I don't know exactly what is going on in Kyle Rittenhouse, what's going on in Kyle Rittenhouse's head. I don't know how he exactly perceives it, but I'm going to make a guess. He sees these riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He takes it upon himself to go to this city, Kenosha, Wisconsin, to be armed, to go to this city to protect small businesses. I think it's quite likely that he may see a tragic destiny. Now, in his what he was trying to do before the event, he was trying to do a lot to support the police. Advocating sort of respect for the police. I think he was kind of perhaps thinking about a career in law enforcement for himself. So he goes to this place and he sees law and order completely broken down. He sees rioters on the streets. He sees businesses being attacked, and he's trying to defend it. He's trying to, he can see, but perhaps he also sees this as the future. Perhaps as someone who is right wing, who perhaps sees a lot of problems with America. He sees that this breakdown in law and order, perhaps the impact of liberal policies on law and order, he perhaps perceives this as the tragic destiny of, again, maybe of his generation, having to live in this world where there's no law and order, no respect for the police, no respect for the sanctity of small businesses. It's all very tragic from his perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's how he's thinking. But I don't know to what extent he is articulating this. I mean, I know he's trying to create a media career for himself, but at least I think he is, or has been. And yeah, Mercury is semi-square his Pluto South Node midpoint, and so this is perhaps what he's, perhaps how he links with Greta. But obviously, as far as I know, he hasn't articulated this vision of a tragic destiny of a large group of people in the same way that Greta Thunberg has. So, looking at this chart, we do see a problem because we are not individualizing these people in any way, shape, or form. I'm just treating them as having the same chart, and that's kind of unfortunate. So what do I do about it? Okay, what I'm trying to do about it, I'm trying to be creative. So how do we actually give them an ascendant? I'd like to give them each an ascendant without a time of birth. So what do I do? Well, they were born just after a new moon. And there was a new moon on January the 2nd. They were born on January the 3rd. So you could say that this new moon, they're Um, I don't know. I suppose perhaps this would be the time. Perhaps their respective mothers were going into labour or whatever this at this time. Um, this new moon represents perhaps the beginning. Um, and why not take the new moon as their moment of birth? I mean, why not? Let's be creative. Let's see what happens. So that means that we we take a new birth chart for Greta. So which is we take this chart as being Greta's birth chart. This is the new moon on January the 2nd, the day before, on the evening of before she was born. But it's a new moon set for Stockholm in Sweden. I think she was born in Stockholm. And we then just treat this as a chart. We treat this as a regular horoscope. Let's have a bit of fun. And ask ourselves, to what extent does this describe Greta? She has, she has the North Node on the midheaven. The North Node is where we should be going. It's our destiny on the midheaven. Her destiny is to be known, to be seen. You can see that most of her planets are below the horizon. It's quite sort of introspective, not wanting to engage with other people. I suppose if she, I think she's been diagnosed, I believe, with Asperger's syndrome, and if she has that, it must be really difficult. But North Node on the midheaven, that is her destiny. North Node in Gemini, very communicative. And then we have Saturn on the midheaven, Saturn in Gemini on the midheaven, Saturn in Gemini in mutual reception to Mercury on the midheaven. That seems to work quite well. Communicating, Saturn and Gemini communicating, because it's in mutual reception to Gemini, because Saturn is in Gemini's sign and Mercury is in Capricorn, which is Saturn's sign. So that fits. So I think that works quite well. And if you can find further evidence of communication, because you've got Venus-Mars conjunction in Scorpio in the third house, and the third house is often connected with communicating. So again, that fits. And Mercury in mutual reception to Saturn. Mercury is important because Mercury rules Virgo, or the ascendant for the new moon, and it rules the midheaven. And so the idea of someone having a high profile, someone communicating in a Saturnine way, in quite a puritanical way. That Saturn on the midheaven in the 10th house is puritanical. It's saying that we've got to sort of forego all this travelling and various luxuries that are destroying the environment and the climate. We've got to forego all that, and we've got to perhaps be more austere. I think that is something that's quite a feature of Greta. So that's her chart. That's her chart for the new moon. And let's treat her Virgo rising. Why not? Because we don't have a time of birth. I mean, I'm sure her time of birth is completely available, but if you look hard enough, if you ask Greta, maybe if you ask her nicely. Then what about Kyle Rittenhouse? What about his new moon? Here's his chart set for the new moon, January the 2nd, 2003. Again, planets are in the same position, but relative to horizon, there are some differences. We can see that the new moon in his chart is in the 8th house. 8th house, traditionally connected with death. He's killed 2 people. The Pluto North Node conjunction is exactly on his descendant. Okay, it's a wide conjunction, but the midpoint, the North Node, the South Node Pluto midpoint is at 13 Sagittarius. So it's exactly on the midpoint, on the Pluto North Node midpoint. And Mercury is exactly semi-square the ascendant. Sorry, yeah, it's exactly semi-square the descendant. So I suppose you could say that Pluto South Node represents the situation he got himself involved in. The descendant is the sort of the other, that chaotic world one has to interact with. You can imagine him in Kenosha, this 17-year-old having to deal with this chaos, a very threatening situation. That's his Pluto South Node on the 7th house, hitting exactly on his ascendant, and Mercury is semi-square it, and his Mercury is, of course, very close to the exaltation degree of Mars. Mars is exalted in the 28th degree of Capricorn. His Mercury is very close to the exaltation degree of Mars, so I would have thought that Mercury might have a Mars feel to it, and perhaps that explains the situation he got himself into in Kenosha. So I think that that fits pretty well. Then we have to consider the event when he killed two people. This happened. This happened on August the 25th. August. There we are. August the 25th, 2020. I'd looked at Wikipedia. It seems to suggest the first shot was at 11:48 p.m. So here's the chart for when that happened. You can see it's a really nasty chart. You can see that there was a Mars-Saturn square, the death pair are square each other, and so the Mars-Saturn midpoint is at around 11 Pisces. Mercury opposition the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So that was what was going on when astrologically at the time of the shooting. So let's compare the Kenosha shooting with Kyle Rittenhouse's new moon chart, the new moon just before he was born, set for Antioch, Illinois. So let's so we will put in the inner wheel, we will put and then so we have, here we go. So there's the Kyle Rittenhouse new moon chart set for the new moon day before he was born. Now, a new moon is an exact event, so we have 1314 Gemini on the ascendant. So at the time of the first shooting, 11:48 p.m., the ascendant was 1242 Gemini. So in fact, it was almost exactly what the ascendant was at the time of a new moon, just before Kyle Rittenhouse was born, which I think I find that to be pretty interesting, and we can see that Mercury is at 11 Virgo. So a Mercury is at the time of the shooting was at 11 Virgo. So that was square. That was square the ascendant. So I think that seems to sort of tie up. That seems to tie up quite well. I mean, that's quite powerful. But then we think, well, what was what was Greta doing when all this was going on? So this was a big event this was a big event for Kyle Rittenhouse. But what about Greta? Well, interestingly, Greta, this was a Tuesday that the Kenosha shooting happened. Tuesday, August the 25th. Now, August the 24th, the day before, was the beginning of the school year in Sweden. And Greta there was an article in The Guardian saying that Greta had gone back to school. She went back to school, I think, on August the 24th, the day before. And The Guardian had an article with a nice picture of Greta. She was on a bicycle. I think she had a backpack, looking very happy. And she said she'd had her gap year. She'd done all her all her stuff, her protests and whatever, and now she was going back to school. She was going to finish school. Now, I don't know what she actually did in that school year, whether she carried on going to school, I don't know. But it was a big day for her. So for Greta, she was going to school after a prolonged absence. But for Kyle Rittenhouse, no, he was doing something different. He was going to a demonstration to protect small businesses, and unfortunately, he ended up killing two people. I just wanted to look at this. I want to look at one more thing before I finish. I wanted to look at the solar arc, the solar arc directions. So for this, so if I take the Kenosha shooting, if I take the new moon before Kyle Rittenhouse's birth, the day before, and I want to look at what I want to do is I want to compare that chart with the solar arc, with his solar arc directions. So to see if there's anything going on there. So what you've got here is in the middle, you've got the new moon before birth. For Kyle Rittenhouse. On the outer wheel, I have directed solar arc direction 1 degree for every year. Directed it. I've moved everything forward 17 degrees to see if there are any interesting solar arc directions. And so what we find is that solar arc directed Saturn is at 1217 Cancer, and so you can see that there's the new moon at 1201 Capricorn, and so if you direct that new moon 17 degrees, Saturn hits that new moon, and I think that. Of course, that's probably what happened. Saturn opposition new moon. That's when this, it's not absolutely 100% exact, but it's pretty close within about a few months. And so, he was at a time when he was very vulnerable for something quite serious happening, like getting arrested and facing trial for killing two people. Now, from Greta's perspective, that Saturn opposition her new moon was different. It was about perhaps going to school after a gap. After a gap must have been quite perhaps a Saturnine experience. I don't know what happened. So, in this video, talking about Greta Thunberg and Kyle Rittenhouse, I've just I've looked at it, and I've tried to come up with some interesting ideas. Or at least I think they're interesting. Maybe you don't find them interesting at all. But the concept that you can actually use a new moon chart as a birth chart in certain situations, and I think I've demonstrated that there are some very real similarities between Karl Rittenhouse and Greta Thunberg, which are shown by their charts. And I'm particularly interested in this Pluto North Node conjunction. Now, there's one thing I did say that I was about to finish. There's one final thing I've got to say about the Pluto North Node conjunction. This Pluto North Node conjunction is exactly 10 degrees apart. Now, 10 degrees is a 36 of the circle. And so a 36 of the circle is sort of 9 times 4. 9 times 4 is 36, right? Yeah. So if you take a harmonic, if you take the ninth harmonic, now in astrology, the ninth harmonic is about our desire to transcend, to move beyond what we are. And so a 36 of a circle, a square is represented by 4, so 4 times 9. So that Pluto South Node conjunction will be reflected as a square on the ninth harmonic. So let's just show you the ninth harmonic. Let's recalculate that chart as a ninth harmonic chart. So by the way, if you want to know a ninth harmonic, you simply multiply all the positions of the planets by 9, and then you successively subtract 360 until you get below 360, and then you have your ninth harmonic chart. So let's look at the ninth harmonic of that chart. So on the ninth harmonic, you can see that Pluto is square the North Node, square the South Node. I think this ninth harmonic probably is more relevant to Greta than it is to Kyle Rittenhouse, but I'm not sure. I mean, for Greta, she has this, she wants to transcend. I mean, we all want to transcend, I suppose, but her transcendence is like struggling to transform Pluto. The North Node is about networks of people. If we take a Germanic, the sort of Uranian school, Eberton's, the sort of Reinhold Eberton view of the North Node, it simply is about networks, connections with people, transforming all of these connections of people around her, and in so being, moving beyond herself, if that makes sense. Because there we have that this T-square, Pluto and the nodal axis. And remember, I said that Mercury was semi-square, semi-square the Pluto North Node midpoint, and so now we see that Mercury is actually exactly conjunct Mercury. So, sorry, Mercury is exactly conjunct Pluto. So here it is the struggle to Mercury communicate and network with all of these people in her generation, and through this to move beyond herself and to become part of something much bigger than herself. So that's her. Does that relate to Karl Rittenhouse? I don't know. But if I was Karl Rittenhouse's astrologer, that's the kind of direction I'd be trying to push him in, because I would be completely neutral. I'd be completely objective. That's what I would say to him. So yeah, I mean, okay, you may not be interested in harmonics. I don't know if anyone uses harmonics anymore, but that's something I just couldn't help but notice. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the subject of Greta Thunberg and Carl Rittenhouse. I hope you found that interesting, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.